level of commitment to a better world, and that's the special challenges facing village elections in China today. And the question is, how is that different from when the Carter Center got involved? Indeed, how did the Carter Center get involved with the village elections?
I think you should talk about your experience of observing the village elections.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are 600,000 little villages, and they're not part of the Communist Party system. Mary told me yesterday that about 6 or 7% of the Chinese people belong to the Communist Party. And the little villages are not part of the Communist Party. That starts with townships, which is pretty big sized towns, and then counties, and then provinces, and each one of those groups increasingly choose the ultimate delegates to go to the National People's Congress that write their laws and change their constitution in effect, and so forth. But the little villages were authorized in 1982, shortly after normalization, to have democratic elections. And 5 years later, they have the National People's Congress every 5 years. They required this to happen. And then about 10 years later, the Carter Center helped them revise the law. And Yahweh's been in more places than I, but Rose and I have witnessed these remarkable elections. In a little village, everyone is registered to vote automatically when they reach the age of 18. And they're expected to vote. And the people that run for public office, we would call them mayor and city council, 5 of them, are elected for 3-year terms. And the process is beautiful. On election day, all the people that are registered to vote come and put their little stools in a square, in the town square, and the candidates for office make a campaign speech from a platform. And they limit it to about 2 or 3 minutes campaign speech. And then when they get through with the campaign speeches, the people go up and they cast a secret ballot with a little screen so nobody can see how they vote. And then when everybody's finished voting, they sit back down and they take the big ballot boxes and dump them on the table, and they count them and they tabulate them on a blackboard, and they announce who won. And they take office that day, and they serve for 3 years. And they can run for re-election. But the trick is that quite often they tape record the campaign speech. So if that same candidate runs for re-election, they replay what they promised 3 years earlier. So there's a pretty good turnover in the election process. But it's a beautiful process. We thought, this is kind of presumptuous, that if the little village elections showed that they were successful, which they have, that the Chinese government might move it up to the township level and so forth, you know. That was our hope, which we didn't talk about, but we accepted privately, but we talked about it. But that hasn't happened. And now there's been kind of a restraint placed on any further progress. And one reason is that the little villagers and their elected officials think they can make their own decisions. Whereas the Communist Party leaders from the township looking down on the little villages think that they still have the authority to make the decisions. And there are a lot of conflicts and arguments. If there's a decision made, for instance, to put a factory near the little town, the Communist Party leaders probably know about it, and they try to go in and they decide where it's going to be placed and confiscate the property, where the little villagers think they ought to make the decision themselves. So there are a lot of those conflicts taking place. So that's one reason it's kind of slowed down the process that we experience. But the Chinese have adopted that little village election policy to the extent that the National People's Congress is now revising the law to improve it, not to do away with it. So I think that still 900,000 Chinese people, which is a large part of it, 1.3 billion, have experienced themselves the chance to participate in democratic elections.
No, I think President Carter has said it so beautifully that these elections are indeed very beautiful. And 900 million Chinese villagers do vote every 3 years. And recently, I think, in addition to what President Carter has said, one concern is there is more and more vote buying among these villages. So we talked to the Ministry of Civil Affairs and said, what are you going to do with these vote buying? They told us there are two things. Number one, vote buying actually is a sign of the competitiveness of these elections. If these elections are not competitive, who will care to pay the voters to get them elected? Number two said, actually, the law itself is a little insufficient because the law doesn't define what vote buying is. So they need to amend the law, which is now will be debated, I think, sometime this month. And hopefully by March of next year, the amended law will be promulgated. So once they have a better definition of what is vote buying or rigging the election, as well as punishment for that, this could have been corrected or things are going to improve. Thirdly, President Carter mentioned, our wish actually is to see village elections being elevated to the township and to the county. That's the same wish of the Chinese leaders. When Peng Zhen, we all call him the godfather of village elections. When he tried to get the law passed, he basically said the villagers will learn how to run their villages, and then they're going to learn how to run their townships, and then they're going to learn how to run the counties. And Premier Wen Jiabao last year at the United Nations, when he was interviewed by CNN, he said the same thing. So it's the wish of the Chinese leaders, it's the wish of you, and we're all keeping our fingers crossed to see that wish come to fruition.
Thank you. We're running a little time. I got a question for you, Madam Lee, and a question for Mary Bullock that you might struggle with in our concluding comments. One questioner asked, who do you think are the best ambassadors for Chinese culture? And another asked, how can we citizens of the United States help further U.S.-China relations and vice versa? So perhaps you and Mary might have the last words in this exchange.
First, who was the ambassador?
Who do you think are the best ambassadors for Chinese culture?
President Carter? After all, it's already a joy for us to listen to his comments, his speech, because I think President Carter really understands China and Chinese history very well, especially even today, because he witnessed all the changes happened in 30 years. Because we actually admire, respect him a lot. That's why we invited him to come to the opening ceremony of our photo exhibition, which we commemorating the 30th years anniversary of its establishment, diplomatic ties, early this year. And also we now need to have a closing ceremony here, because we really thank him a lot for the signing the diplomatic relations with China. Absolutely, I believe President Carter will be cultural ambassador who really made a great contribution to the relationship.
Well, I think the future of U.S.-China relations lies in the hands of the young people of America and of China. And I think China has a very strong sense of generational cohort in terms of bringing in a new leadership group every 10 years or so. I think our young people today in this country and in China don't really know each other that well. I think these are different generations. And so I was delighted that President Obama seems to have committed to send something like 100,000 American students to China. We know many Chinese students are coming here. But I think forging ties between the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds in this country is really how you'll shape the future.
Because we really pay a great attention on young people exchanges. For example, early next year, we are planning to bring senior high students from Beijing to visit Hawaii, BYU Hawaiian campus. And we will host the speech contests and dialogue with American students with the university where President Obama used to study there. So we will let the students to speak, this time in English. How do you think about China and the United States? And we will bring them not only to Hawaii, BYU campus, but also to Washington, D.C., Sidwell School. They have a very special, class for teaching Chinese. And we hope those students can meet President Obama because his daughter now is studying there. So we think that we pay great attention on young people's exchanges. We have been doing this for almost 10 years, and we have already brought 2,000 Chinese young students coming to the United States. So we will continue to do so.
I think we're on the same wavelength here.
Yes.
And we are close to the end of our time. Is Dr. Lubing Gu in the audience? Professor Gu, thank you very much. Because you're not mic'd, I'm going to have to do this from the stage. Professor Gu is president of the Atlanta Chinese Students and Scholars Association and president of the Atlanta Chinese Life Association. And I was asked on behalf of the association to make a small presentation to President Carter after reading a very brief statement, which